Hey guys, welcome back to Just Another Opinion Media Review. And yes, I did change the name. Still the same letters, JAOMR, but just changing the movie to media just to make it a little bit more easier. Since I'm going to do a bunch of different different kind of content with this. So today's game game, that we're going to be talking about is Forspoken. So how I do previous videos was like I tried to get basically the main story of the plot, and you'll hear me even right now. I go So basically, I'm just gonna do there's gonna be spoilers, but I'm gonna just try to do like a summary, like not quick summary, but not in depth summary either. So you play as this character named Frey. She's from New York. And she's homeless, and she's on her third strike, basically, of like, hey, the judge is like, hey, I'm giving you, since it's your birthday coming up, I'm giving you this one final gift, saying not going to jail. If you mess it up, you're gonna go to jail. So she leaves, and a couple gang members kind of come over to her. He's like, hey, do you have the car? You got the car? And Frey's like, oh no, I'm not. You basically, you can go get your own car. I'm done. So they chase her. She ends up escaping. She gets to her house, or her apartment, which is for a building that's no longer operational. She sleeps there, and then she ends up waking up to a fire. And the gang members had found her and then lit her apartment on fire. And so she runs, and now she's kind of just on the streets, and it's been a couple of days, and she sees this object fly out of the sky, and she tracks it down, and it's a cuff, and she gets teleported to this fantasy world. And keynote, one of the things she says in her apartment is like, oh, I really like the book Alice in Wonderland. I wonder if I'll get swept into my own fantasy world, blah blah blah. Now keep that in mind. It's a key part of why I think the story is kind of crap, but I'll get to it. So she is, she puts the cuff on. She, like I said, she's in this fantasy world, and she's kind of like, well, what the hell? Then the cuff starts talking to her and kind of explaining things. I knew you would come in. I knew as soon as I started talking, you were going to be rolling your butt right in. This is LeBron. I was like, I should probably close the door, because I bet you $5 that the cat's going to come rolling in, and here he is. So if you guys hear purring or a cat meowing, that's LeBron, and he wants attention, and he thinks I'm talking to somebody, or he thinks I'm talking to him, so he's like, I got to be in here. So, alright, sorry for the deviation. No, I'm going back to talking on here, okay? Alright, you go lay down. Alright, so the cuff's telling her kind of like, oh, you're in this fantasy world, these are my powers. And so she ends up getting attacked by a couple of she thinks they're dogs at first, and then they turn around and they're like, they got like bones coming out of them, and so they attack her, and she ends up using the cuff's powers to defeat them. And this is if you've seen on Twitter, this is like one of the things that people were like, oh my god, this is such cringe writing. The scene was not that bad. It was, it's like, I don't know, it's just like, oh wow, these are my powers, I did this. And she's like not listening to the cuff. It's not a bad scene. So she ends up killing them, and the cuff's like, hey, we should go to this town. So they go to this town, and these people are like, oh my god, it's a demon. And so they lock her up. And then this girl, I think her name's Audie or something like that, she ends up saying, hey, no, we shouldn't lock this girl up. She's gonna be our savior. So the four judges say, fine. No, never mind. They don't. Audie ends up breaking Frey out, and so that's probably not her name. But anyway, so if you hear Audie and it's this other character, that's probably who it is. But so she ends up breaking out. There's terrible stealth section where it's like the game's kind of like, we gotta tell you that there's gonna be guards over there, and so you gotta walk this way, and then it stops and it cuts, and then it does it again, and it's like, oh my god, let me just stealth out. I don't like stealth missions, but I also don't like stealth missions that have like kind of like no consequences unless you make the consequences. So you get out, and she's like, oh, my father, he knows about teleportation. Go out here, and she marks a spot. I think he was last seen over here, and if you can get this, then we can get you sent back to your world. So you go out, you find her father, and he's alive, but he's been like half possessed in a way. There's a thing, that's something in the air. I can't remember what they call it, but it will, the people who live there, if they breathe it in, they'll turn into zombies. And so he breathed half of it in, so he's like half zombie, but he's still alive, but he's like, senile and stuff like that. So you bring him back, and she's like happy, and the daughter's happy that he's back. And then you have to go fight this boss. And there's I think they call them tantas. They're basically I think they're one step below being a god. Like they mingle with the people, but they also have powers. And so like, oh yeah, if you go beat this tanta, we'll be able to get you back to your world. So Frey's like, well, I'll just go talk to her. So you go meet her, and then the lady's like, no, I'm gonna kill you. So so you end up having to kill her, and this puts like a strain on Frey, where she's like, oh my god, I just killed somebody, and the cuff's like, well, you had to do it. It's kind of self-defense. She was gonna kill you, and so then you go fight. You come back, and they still don't have the technology to, or the guys, the dad is still kind of like senile, and they're like, oh, just go fight these other bosses. And so you go fight the other bosses, and then you come back. Well, there's also this so there's a tree that is there, and it has some type of chemical in it that slows the process of people changing. And so this tree it runs out in the town. So like, hey, go over to this place over here, and we'll get more of it, that liquid stuff, and bring it back. So I knew going out to this town that's far away, that you come back and the father would be basically dead. Well, once you go out to this town, you get attacked by another one of the tantas, and then you find out that it alludes to like, oh, you're the daughter of one of the tantas. And so Frey's like, no, this can't be. And so you go back, you see the father, his last breath's like, I knew you were the one. And she's like, okay, so shit, so my mom is one of the tantas. And I can't remember which one. I think it's the Justice one. No, it's not the Justice one. It's the Hope. I don't know. There's a Justice. There's a Fighter. I don't know. So now that the father passed, the phrase kind of like, fuck, I'm stuck here now. And so the daughter comes up, and she's like, I'm sorry that we had to inconvenience you. And Frey's like, I've been doing what you wanted me to do. And they're both right. Frey's been doing stuff to get back, and the people have been, accepting, but they also been kind of like, hey, you should do a little bit more, So you find out that Cuff is actually the bad guy, because Oh, so you walk out and you're leaving, and then the second to final Tanta comes in, takes you away, and she puts you in this prison that you're back in New York. And then Cuff's like, you should probably wake out of this. You should wake out. And then you end up waking out. You go to her place. It's not a boss fight. You find her. I think she used up too much of her energy, and she's passed. So then, so now that 3 of the Tantas are dead, and I'm sorry if I'm at this point and they're not called Tantas. I'm pretty sure they're called Tantas. I do zero evidence for looking at this stuff. I always go off by what I hear, or what I think I remember hearing. So Cuff's like, oh nope, that's enough. I'm actually the villain, and you've been doing all my dirty work. And so at this point, I just want to kind of break in. So a lot of the criticism of Frey and Cuff is that there's a lot of like fuck you back and forth to each other. I get that reviewers probably have beat the game, or I hope they at least beat the game before they review it. And I know that they probably don't want to give away spoilers, like, oh, there's a reason, why Cuff is kind of an asshole towards Frey. But, in that moment, I'm like, this is why Cuff always kind of shits on Frey, because Cuff's the bad guy. So, of course, she's not going to be like, oh, you're such a great, person, Frey, He's kind of like, yeah, fuck you, side eye, and like, yeah, I can't wait to get out of this prison, and I'm going to, take over the world. So, Frey loses all her powers, and then she has to run, and then her mother there's a dragon at the very beginning of the game that's kind of just like walking around, and that dragon ends up being the mother to Frey. So we get all the backstory of how all the Tantas went evil, and they fought Cuff, or whatever his name is. It's like, I think it starts with S, but I'm just gonna keep calling him Cuff. They beat Cuff, and then they end up, they can't actually kill him, so they take him and like split him into 4, and all 4 of them wear him as cuffs. And so at this time, the mother is pregnant, and she's like, and all the Tantas are turning evil, and so she's like, I'm gonna send you to New York, and your father is a hero in New York, and blah blah blah. So that's how Frey ended up in New York. She's actually born in I think it's called Athia, and so so you get about an hour of back dialogue of word Frey, who is Frey, daughter of this lady, and oh yes, and these are actually her powers. Cuff never had the powers. He just pretended to have the powers. So you get to make a choice now. Now that you find out the backstory, you also never see who your dad is. Because I was actually kind of interested, because they're like, oh, he's the hero of the Earth realm. I'm like, oh, cool. They're like, who is he? Like, I'm trying to figure out, like, trying to think of like who they're trying to reference. And so, yes, no, you're not the hero. So as you can see by the gameplay, Frey is black, and her mom is white. So I was like really curious to see who her dad was. I really wanted to see, because it's just interesting. So you come back with your mom. She's a dragon. You fight Cuff. You end up it's like 2 stages. You beat Cuff, but your mother ends up dying, and she gives the rest of her powers to you, and then you end up beating Cuff, and with the help of the other ladies, the other Tantas, and you end up sealing Cuff away. Now I assume that it's gonna be on her hand, but they never alluded to it. So then there's like a bunch of oh shit, this is what I wanted to explain. So Cuff tells you halfway into the game, he's like, hey, you're gonna have to make a decision. You're gonna have to either be the hero or you're gonna have to leave. So at the very end of the game, or prior to the boss fight, there's two scenes, or there's two portals. Your mom says you can either stay here and help us, or you can go back to New York. So I had left this. I knew I was gonna be leaving, and so I didn't. I assumed that that there's gonna be a big implement. At least a couple more hours worth of gameplay on both choices. So I was like, I'll just wait. And I went to talk to Jacob, and I'm like, yeah, I'm trying to think of what decision I want to make, because the whole game, they've been saying Frey wants to be going back to New York, which is funny because keep in mind, she wanted to get swept away, but now that she's in this world, she's like, I don't want to be here. I want to go back to here. So the whole time she's going, oh, I want to be here, back in New York. And so I was like, James like, just go back to New York. And I was like, you know what, you're right. I don't like when games have a character for 90% of the time saying, oh, I don't like this, and then they get like 2 seconds of backstory, and they're like, oh, I'm a changed person now. So I was like, I'm gonna go back to New York. So the mother's like, I still love you. Best of luck to you. You go back. You find your cat that you gave to the judge, and Frey's like, well, I wonder what we're gonna do now. I wonder what's next for us. And so the game just ends. And I was just like sitting there. I'm like, really? You gave me two fucking options. One, either fight Cuff, because I did like Cuff. I think I find that humor of back and forth between two characters that hate each other but also don't hate each other. I find that funny, and I did like Cuff. So when I got the decision to go back to New York, and it's like, yep, the game just ends. It's just like, don't fucking put that option in there. Don't waste my fucking time to pick that option when you're not even gonna give me a satisfied. And I called Jacob up like right after. I was like, there's so much shit that they could have done with this ending. You could have been like, you could have looked back and Cuff could have just been destroying the Athia as you're leaving, and you're just like, well, that's not my place. It is, and I didn't give him the option because we find out these are her powers. They're just sealed away. She could have found the powers back in New York, and maybe she would have been getting jumped by the gang members, and then she would have shot him with a rock, and she's like, oh my god, I can actually do that. And then maybe she becomes a hero in our world, or she becomes the villain where she's like, oh, nobody can stop me, I have powers. But no, it's just a stupid 2-second ending, credits roll. So like I said, then you go fight Cuff, you beat Cuff, you seal him away. And I think, I'm not 100% sure, but I think Cuff, he's like, he got you to do the dirty work, but I don't think he realized that, you're going to have such a connection to these people. And so the game ends where she's able to go through portals. You see her flying through New York, and the cat's like, oh my god, that's my former owner, and then the very end of the game, Frey's talking to Audie, and she's like, oh, it's a lot of work, after Audie leaves, she's like, oh, it's a lot of work for one girl, but at least I got you here, Cuff. And Cuff's like, my name's I can't remember what the stinger was, but it's like, this is actually my name, so don't call me Cuff. So overall, my opinion on it, I'd say some of the criticism that it is valid with the game. I think having to stop, screen goes to black, and then it comes right back up like now you're in a cutscene. Without being in a cutscene, you're just like talking. I think that's poor editing. I think the dialogue is not that bad. There wasn't like one there, and I didn't do all the side missions, all that stuff. but there wasn't like any dialogue that was like rolling my eyes like, oh my god, this is so cringe. Oh Jesus, you know. There is repeat dialogue, which most of the time happens when you go to a safe house, and when you walk in a safe house, Cuff goes, "I'm gonna take a load off," and phrase like a load off, and there's like no conversation after that. You know, it just ends like right there. Like I think that stuff's fair criticism, where it's like, okay, that repeats. And I heard a little bit out in the when you're battling monsters, you know, there's a lot of, we got this. Oh, I'm in, you know, powerful or some blah blah blah, like stuff like that. Like that's fair. I told Jacob, I said, this game's not worth $70. This game's worth probably about, I'd say, 40. You know, the world is nice, but it doesn't feel like it's lived in. Especially like when you go to like New York, and granted it's Christmas Eve, but the streets are like dead. And I've never been to New York, but I assume that there'd be more people besides like 5 people just walking around, you know. But you know, like, so I mean, the buildings don't look that great, like, you know, but you're not spending that much time in New York to begin with. I mean, it's max of probably about maybe an hour and a half throughout the whole game that you're in New York. So I mean, like, yeah, they're not gonna spend that much time on those buildings. You know, the like I said, the open world seemed fine. It was too big. It just didn't feel like it was, you know, lived in. But otherwise, the game's not bad. Like, if you made this far out of my rambling, and you're probably like, it's not Tantus. And I'll look that up. I'll look it up before. If it's not Tantus, I'll put it like a disclaimer, like, hey, I've been saying it wrong. But the game's not bad. You know, you just like I said, it's probably more worth $40 than it is $70. But yeah, I'd say I give it a solid. So I do scores. I think do out of 5. I'd give it a 3. You know, I think it's a game that, you know, if you're looking for some type of like just action. Oh, and that's the other thing I want to say. You have like 4 abilities. You don't get your second ability until like 5 or 6 hours into the game, depending on if you're just going straight to fight the boss. But at like your first ability is rocks. Your second ability is fire. Water's the next, and I never used the last. I was at the time that was just like, I'm just running it towards the end. But I'd almost maxed out my first tree, or my first rock abilities, and then I almost maxed out my fire, and fire is like OP as fuck. And so after that, I was like, I don't need these other abilities. So that was what I was gonna get at. Where I think they made all abilities. So there's certain enemies that you can fight. I think they're color coded, but I never really paid attention to it because, you know, I was pretty strong with my abilities, so I was able just to beat the enemies with the fire or whatever. So I think they just kind of designed it as a way, like, yeah, we have all these abilities, but, you know, if you just prefer this one, yeah, we're not gonna take it away, because we don't have the time to make sure that all these abilities are effective against all the monsters. So, yep, that's my review of Forspoken. Hope you guys enjoyed it, and if you made it this far with me rambling, I appreciate it. All right, thank you. Bye.
Feeling better?
Not really. I had a nightmare and it was 10 times better than this.
It is quite beautiful.
Yeah, in a everything here wants to kill you kind of way.
No, I just mean that even amongst the madness, there's a sort of delicate grace. Destruction and corruption are forms of creation in themselves.
Wow, you sound like a serial killer.
What?
Destruction and corruption are beautiful forms of creation in themselves.
I don't sound like that.
You absolutely sound like that.
Oh, no, you absolutely sound like that. Yeah, see? 2 can play at that game.
You're fucking stupid.
Well, perhaps not everyone has the sensitivity and subtlety required to appreciate the beauty inherent in chaos.
Sure, Hannibal.
Who? Oh, yeah. Joke.
Bingo. Well, before we set off, we might as well take a look at this floor plan that Johidi gave us.